5, 4, 3.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We'll continue with the next session. I'm Paul Choi, the mid-cap biotechnology analyst here at Goldman Sachs. And for our next session, I'm very pleased to host Exelixis. Joining us is the CEO, Mike Morrissey, and also on the line is Susan from Investor Relations. And so, as with prior sessions with Exelixis here, what we'll do is let Mike kick it off with some introductory remarks, and then we'll go into the Q&A portion of the session. If along the way, if any clients or investors have questions for Mike or myself, please feel free to submit them through the Goldman Sachs research portal, and time permitting at the end, we'll read 1 or 2 questions there. Alternatively, you can submit questions to me directly via email, and again, if we have time, we'll try and squeeze them in at the end. And so with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you for some opening remarks, and then we'll go into the Q&A.
All right. Fantastic, Paul. Thanks again for the invite. Sorry we couldn't do this live as usual down in LA, but it's great to be on the call with you and your team today. Before I begin, I'll remind you that I'll be making forward-looking statements today, so please see our SEC filings for a description of the risks that we face in our business. In terms of my, kind of 1-minute overview, I think most of you know us. We are a 25-year-old commercial stage biotech company focused in oncology. We have a long history of drug discovery, drug development, and most recently in the commercial area with our efforts to commercialize cabozantinib, both Cometriq and Cabometyx, leading TKI in the single agent TKI in the RCC space with additional labels for second line liver and medullary thyroid cancer. It's been a very exciting year in 2020. Lots of stuff going on in the world, obviously, and lots of data from us in terms of what's happening with Cabo, especially in the context of Cabo-IO combinations, which is the main focus we have as we go forward, and expecting a busy second half of the year as well. So I think that's a good place to stop. Paul, I'll let you engage with questions. Please, go ahead.
Great. Thanks for that, Mike. And so maybe in terms of questions, we can start with some big picture things and, some of the your longer term views for the company. And, you recently issued a 5-year top line guidance for the first time, which I think, earlier this year, which surprised investors a little bit, calling for, potentially U.S. product sales of approximately $4 billion in the 2025 timeframe. And so, can you maybe walk investors through, what assumptions went into that outlook that you put out to the market? And, this seems to be, again, surprising investors. So, what do you think, maybe from a big picture perspective, investors are, currently missing with the Exelixis story here?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. This is somewhat old news since we started the year at a different healthcare banking conference to, I think, kind of reframe the attention for investors beyond the main question that we got probably 1,000 times in 2019 and going into 2018 around 9ER. So our whole focus was to say the Exelixis story is broad and deep. Certainly, we're focused on cabozantinib as a main driver for value creation, along with a lot of emerging efforts in other compounds, other MOAs, early discovery efforts, along with a lot of, I think, very important BD activity to help us build a diversified portfolio. But we wanted simply to get investors to think about the Cabo story beyond 9ER. And that was the main focus in January, because quite simply, we were kind of sitting on a lot of good emerging data that now people have seen at ASCO GI for HCC, at ASCO GU for prostate cancer. We had the 9ER data come out in April. We had a very strong presence at the virtual ASCO meeting in Chicago. That would have been in Chicago, I should say, with data for lung, data in bladder, another reprise of prostate cancer. So the whole way to kick off the year was to really focus people on the broader story across Cabo indications in terms of what we're doing in renal, what we're doing in liver, what we're doing in prostate and lung, et cetera, as well as then highlight the importance of our pipeline with 3 new potential new INDs this year. So it's a big story. It's a broad set of activities. We're not the Cabo only company, even though we certainly have a view on how we can maximize success. The number you referred to is a number that $4 billion a year number in 2025 is what success could look like if we hit on all these trials, and certainly, coming off of a strong showing with top line data for 9ER and the other data sets that we presented this year, I think gives us a lot of confidence going forward. But got to run the experiments, got to get those trials done. Certainly lots of moving pieces this year with COVID that have come up since March, and I think the team has done a great job of navigating all those different issues, and we're looking forward to a really strong back half of the year.
Great. Thanks for that. Maybe just to follow up on the tail end of your comment there, Mike, with regard to COVID, you guys provided some color on your most recent earnings call on the impact from COVID, but could you maybe speak to, what's been happening since then, both on the clinical and commercial front with regards to your operations? Have you seen things, return more or less to normal? And are you still largely in a virtual versus direct selling environment? And just sort of, help us mark to market on how things are going with regard to the impact from COVID.
Yeah, so COVID has, certainly been a big challenge for the entire, obviously the entire world, but certainly the entire industry. We have continued to pull out all the stops to make sure that as a priority, we're keeping our employees safe, number one, and productive in terms of working virtually, and then making sure that we're able to continue to get our drug and our drugs to patients who need those drugs, whether they be part of a clinical trial or part of the commercial world. So I think the team has done just a marvelous job. Been really thinking out of the box, working out of the box. The challenge when you work from home is that you can work all the time, and I think the team has done that to make sure that we maximize the benefit we can bring to patients, whether they be through the commercial setting or as part of our clinical trials. In terms of the commercial world, we are still working in a virtual environment as is appropriate. That may start to loosen up as we head into the summer. We're very adept at doing that. Our team is very skilled at doing both personal and non-personal promotions in a virtual setting, and we're finding that a lot of practices and a lot of clients like that, and we get more time with them now than we have ever before because they're able to allocate time and they're not quite as busy as they used to be as they're bombarded with visitors and everything else. So that's actually working out pretty well. On the clinical world, we have been working on a really patient-by-patient basis to be able to track what's going on. Obviously, as the pandemic has spread across the world from a temporal basis, you have regions that turn on and turn off based upon the overall rate of infection and how the healthcare systems have evolved in real time to really address that. April was actually a pretty typical month for us in terms of enrollment. Screening was a little bit down in April. May was probably the most impacted month, and we're seeing, I think, a good turnaround in June. So all that being said, again, the team has done a marvelous job. It's still a very fluid and dynamic situation. We haven't changed any of our kind of top-line projections and guidance for the year in terms of, enrollment, trials that complete enrollment, top line data readout, et cetera. That could change over time. It just depends upon how things evolve throughout the rest of the year. But I can tell you that I'm very proud and very pleased with just how well the team has worked to be able to mitigate all those issues and continue moving things forward.
Great. Thanks for that, Mike. One of the things you mentioned earlier is 9ER, and of course, investors are aware that you top-lined the results not too long ago with some very impressive PFS results and an interim look on terms of OS, which was also showed a strong p-value. So I guess what investors are looking for is sort of more detailed data. And so can you maybe update us on how you and your partner Bristol are thinking about disclosing more details from the 9ER study? And then I had a follow-up question on that. Yeah,
of course. So look, I mean the top line data was really great to see. We're very pleased with how that data looks to us, and obviously we've seen all the data, and we've only had a couple of hazard ratios in the 8K on April 20th when that announcement came out. We're expecting to have the full data set presented in the fall. Details to be defined as they get worked out. Obviously, it's a priority for us and our partner to get this submission wrapped up and written up and in ASAP. And the team is working together really well to get that done. We think it's a very strong data set. We think it's a very competitive data set. The PFS HR is a real standout number, and there's lots behind that I'm very excited to be able to have presented. The whole narrative in 2019 was really around, would you get survival at the first interim? Would that be would that pass the bound of significance? How would you compete if you didn't have it? And all the hedging around, do you get it or not? So obviously we're very pleased to have that. We have a lot of experience from Meteor having strong survival data and what that can mean in terms of being able to really use that as differentiating data in the marketplace, and we certainly plan to do that here. So we're very excited about it. Obviously, can't wait to get that presentation out there in prime time and to complete the filing and get it approved and be able to go out in detail on literally day one once it's approved.
Great. Thanks for that. And again, let me offer my congratulations on the strong data. So I guess maybe as a follow-up here, Mike, we have a partial picture, as you mentioned, with the hazard ratios and some information on survival. But then, as you look at the market, are there any particular areas where you see the checkpoint inhibitor plus TKI combos falling short, where you see the 9ER regimen having a particular advantage? Any particular subpopulation that you'd want to emphasize, or any subcategory that stands out, at least in your mind, where you think you might make more of a push versus the competition?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's hard to answer that question without going into data, and obviously can't do that today. My advice to people on the sell side and investors is to look at the totality of the data when it's presented. It'll be a very fulsome data release and presentation in terms of efficacy, safety, subgroups, tolerability. And I think that's one of that latter issue, the tolerability of 40 milligram starting dose of Cabo with full dose Nivo is I think going to be one of the surprises of the full data set when it's presented. What's really important in these early line settings where you're looking to chronically dose patients is to obviously keep patients on drug, right? So you really want to have a low discount rate, and you want to be able to really fine tune the balance between efficacy and safety and tolerability. And I think we did that with the 40 milligram dose here combined with full dose Nivo. There have been some incremental data releases in ASCO GI, at ASCO GU, at Big ASCO a few weeks ago around that dose in combination with either Nivo or Atezo that I think point to these low discount rates, good overall tolerability, et cetera, which I think plays into the story. So from my point of view, we're seeing very consistent activity and behavior with this approach, and it's very exciting. So, but again, I think the totality of data is what's key, and again, looking forward to being able to get that out there and then give people like you and your colleagues a chance to do all the all the cross trial comparisons, which nobody should do, but everybody does within Excel to be able to figure out how these things look side by side with all the caveats in going into it. But we're very excited, and again, we think we did a lot of market research for the year or so before the trial read out to understand, kind of get an early jump on potential scenarios for data from the trial. We've done a lot since the trial came out, and we're getting a lot of very positive feedback, a lot of excitement for that doublet and the data that we've got. So obviously, can't wait to get it out there and to certainly get it filed and approved, and then start getting it to patients.
Great. Thanks for that. We definitely look forward to more details on the data and more clarity on what's driving your enthusiasm. Maybe taking a step back and looking at the market here, Mike. Can you maybe tell us where you and your colleagues in the sales force are seeing penetration and sort of utilization of the checkpoint inhibitor plus TKI combinations? What does that adoption look like in the market currently, based on what you're seeing? And then I have a follow-up with regard to Cabo monotherapy utilization.
Yeah, sure. So again, in the RCC space right now, IO combos really dominate the frontline setting. On any given week or month, quarter, they have the combined, if you will, IO combination market penetration is about 80%. 75 to 80% of the overall first-line markets, the rest being TKI monotherapy. That combined IO combination basket, if you will, market basket, is approximately split 50-50 between IO and IO TKI. And it varies, month to month, quarter to quarter. I'm not sure there's a big significant difference, but we certainly see some flexibility there. So opportunity is I think broad to be able for combination like we have from 9ER to be able to capture share from both as well as again even further reinforce the issue that for those patients that are getting again TKI monotherapy, how they should maybe move to a doublet like Cabo Nivo. So lots of opportunity, lots of upside from my point of view. We've articulated the vision that based upon the totality of data, we believe every patient with kidney cancer, with metastatic advanced kidney cancer, should see Cabo in either the first line setting or the second line setting, based upon the totality of data that we've got from previously from Meteor and from Cabo-Sun, but certainly 9ER reinforces that. So we want to maximize our penetration in the frontline setting because, state the obvious, right? The longer duration of therapy can really be the multiplier, both for patient benefit, but also from a revenue point of view. So we'll be certainly engaging there in a very compliant manner, but certainly very aggressively to maximize every share point we possibly can in the frontline setting.
Great. That makes tremendous sense. And then just one more market question, which is just with regard to Cabo in the second line. Any update on how sequencing has been going, just given that TKIs are now being used in combination? Any delay from your feedback in terms of the sales force on getting patients on, or longer timelines to get it on, or just sort of what's happening with regard to the second line market? where you seem to be gaining?
Yeah. So it's a great question. We've certainly spoken about this a lot in the context of 2019 earnings. The kinetics of transitioning from first line to second line are different between, say, IO versus IO-TKI, and there was, that equilibrium had to reach steady state after the IO-TKIs were approved last year. So that happened, kind of, I want to say in the Q3, Q4 timeframe, and we have seen steady increase in our second line share as patients are progressing on a more predictable manner based upon the various PFS values that are out there, number one, and as kind of we track it month by month, quarter over quarter. So we have very strong. Again, we're the leading second line agent by literally any metric, and certainly post IO as well. So it's behaving as we predicted. Going back to 2018 when Ipi-Nivo was approved, it's just taken a little bit of time for the actual kinetics to work themselves out as the math would dictate. So, but all in all, it's gone really well. So very pleased about that, and the team's done a great job of making sure that we maintain that market leading position.
Great, thanks for that. And maybe the last question on RCC is, can you maybe frame for us, how you and you're seeing the Japan opportunity here? This is a major market, where it's still early days potentially for Cabo here. And so can you, update us on what's been happening there with Cabo and just, how you see the commercial opportunity, potentially being incremental to Exelixis?
Yeah, so it's the last region that we'll be launching in. Obviously, our partner Takeda has had success there, and it's a very challenging regulatory environment to go through all the different steps to get approved there. So congrats to them for getting that done. If you look at the numbers, say 2018 numbers, which are probably the best numbers I have from a variety of sources, there's between 12 to 13,000 patients there annually who are drug treatment eligible. First line is in the 6,000 or so patient level range. Second line is, maybe 2,000 or so, and then the rest are late line. So it's an important market. It's one that obviously we have been, excited to be able to enter. Again, with the success of Meteor and Cabo-Sun, and certainly now 9ER, which will go into their overall filing approach since they were involved in supporting that trial. And we're excited about getting that going, right? So it's a big piece of the global marketplace, and we have a very motivated and professional partner with Takeda there. So just we'll keep an eye on that, and certainly be prepared to update the revenue numbers and their growth as that proceeds going forward.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. I want to switch gears, maybe if we could, to HCC, and besides your recent 9ER update, I think some of the most interesting data you presented, at least from my perspective this year, was the mixed population of frontline and later line HCC patients in terms of the combination regimen with regards to Cabo in HCC patients. So you saw a very, pretty impressive result there, in my opinion, and I think this is something that supports potentially a promising future there. So can you maybe just remind us what you presented here earlier, and then just what are sort of next steps for the combination regimen with Cabo here?
Yeah, so we have a lot going on here, and as I've spoken to previously, we think the liver cancer opportunity is really one of the largest growth opportunity indications in all of oncology. If you look at the epidemiology, the number of patients who are diagnosed every year globally, broadly speaking, but also in the U.S. and the urgent need for better therapies, better combinations, et cetera. We think that, there's a lot of patients that could be much better served with better therapies that would, eventually consolidate treatment like you see in renal cancer, like you see in lung cancer and breast cancer in a way that brings really maximal benefits in a very controlled way. So we're excited about that. We have, obviously, you have the EMBRAVE study with bevacizumab and atezolizumab that has now been approved based upon the EMBRAVE data, which had survival benefits last year, has approved right during the whole ASCO meeting recently, and really, I think, sets the stage for really drawing patients into the medical oncology sleeve, if you will, that can give them really better benefit than what's been seen previously with a compound like sorafenib or lenvatinib with what looks to be like very, very good tolerability as well. Our data, so we had data at ASCO GI from cohorts with BMS in their 040 study. It was a mixed population of first and second line patients with a mix of doublet cabo-nivo as well as triplet cabo-nivo-ipi. So you start slicing and dicing that overall study, which had less than 70 patients, and you get down to some pretty small numbers. We were very pleased to see some of the longer term follow-up data around survival for the various different mixes, if you will, of the overall population, but also the different cuts of that population. And we think that is indicative, again, of the potential of these kinds of doublets and triplets in that setting. And we're certainly very excited about the 312 study, looking at the combination of cabo with atezo in the first line setting against sorafenib, that has enrolled well and is nearly completed in terms of its enrollment. Again, this is very similar to EMBRAVE, only you swap out cabo for bevacizumab, and that's to be quite frank, is a trade that I like a lot relative to the activity profile of cabo. But again, we've got to do the experiments. Got to get these trials done and see how the data looks. But coming off the momentum that we've got this year, it's hard not to be excited about what we think we can do there relative to what we've seen, with the combination and other tumor types so far. But you got to get it done, and you got to, open the envelope and see the p-value and see how it looks. So stay tuned on that. But if things go well and we get the events we need, we're projecting that we'll have top line data by the end of the year. So stay tuned.
Great. Thanks for that. And just as a reminder to investors listening on the call, from the Checkmate 040 study, it was a mix, as you mentioned, Mike, of treatment naive and treatment experienced patients. And with regard to the median OS, the doublet did show almost 22 months of survival, compared to 10 months for the second line patients and 8 months for placebo. So, clearly very promising results that I think, undergird your enthusiasm that you mentioned, Mike, for the 312 study.
Yeah.
Which is coming up.
Yep.
So just in terms of maybe following up on 312, your frontline study, as you mentioned here, what has the enrollment been like? Has that been, something that's been, what was the enrollment status, I guess, prior to the COVID? Maybe just a follow up on that. And you said it sounds like you're on track to maintain your timeline here, and just what will you potentially disclose here, towards year end in terms of data?
Well, yeah, so it's all event based, and certainly primary endpoints are both PFS and overall survival. So endpoints that we're constantly looking at, right? So yeah, it's a very standard type trial, and it's a very if you think about the data that was in the New England Journal of Medicine from EMBRAVE and some of the other data that we recently presented, we just need to get it done now, right? But it's we have a great team working on this within development, and obviously there's lots of enthusiasm for the approach relative to the single agent activity of Cabo that we saw in Celestial, again, giving a survival advantage compared to placebo in the second line setting, and the overall activities that we're seeing both earlier, as you mentioned in the 040 study, with other IOs. So again, exciting times. We've got to keep our eye on the ball, and there's certainly challenges involved with the COVID pandemic, but I think we've done a great job, and the team has been very, very focused on making sure that we're tracking the situation very carefully. So again, there's always a level of fluidity here. So, we're not done till we're done, but I really like the momentum that we've got here as we go forward.
Great. Thanks for that. Maybe just on the commercial side with regard to HCC, Mike, you've historically commented that, you view it as an immature market and sort of where RCC was a few years ago, and one that needs to be sort of built and educated with regards to Cabo. So can you maybe, update us on how the commercial efforts are going there? What is sort of the run rate, if you can provide any quantitative metrics in the HCC indication going like, and just what is adoption like then so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we've talked about, and I think as we predicted, this would be a slow ramp due to the fact that the second line setting was historically been dominated by IO. Prescribers and HCPs like to switch MOAs here. So the classic paradigm was first line was a TKI, second line was usually an IO, and then third line would be another TKI. Even though some of the data on the IOs in the second line setting is modest at best. That was just, I think the overall gestalt has always been it's better to change MOAs, and so there's no real data to say that, but that's kind of the way people behave. What's happening and what will happen, I predict, will be that now with the IO frontline data from Embrave looking so positive, that will get used, I think, predominantly as we go forward. So that'll be a big draw for new patients, to really expand the size of that population, getting IO up front. And that will exhaust IO then, based upon the fact that a second IO has not been able to. No one's shown that a second IO can salvage refractory or resistant patients who gets IO frontline. So that then opens up the opportunity for compounds like Cabo's second line, and Cabo's one of the few that has a clear bona fide survival advantage in the second line setting. So again, as predictions go, and take that for what it's worth, wouldn't surprise me if we see an uptick, kind of again at somewhat steady state, as patients start coming off of the frontline IO combination. But for us, the real focus is to maximize that opportunity while we have it, but then to move up the frontline ourselves if the 312 data is positive and differentiating and allows us to be able to move in that much larger opportunity and to get treatment naive patients who can benefit from that doublet if we have the data. So stay tuned.
Okay, sounds good, Mike. You have obviously in addition to 312, many other trials going on here. Most notably, I think your basket trial 021, and you've been providing various updates from the various cohorts over the past year or two. And more recently, you provided an update in the lung population. Can you maybe frame for us, how you're thinking, of the next steps here based on what you presented most recently at the ASCO meeting? What did you see in the data that you viewed as most encouraging and that supports developmental efforts here in lung?
Sure. So we had our first data presentation for cohort 7, the first 30 patients that were enrolled. Again, just to kind of reframe the opportunity to a certain degree, we've added an additional 50, we've added enrollment up to an additional 50 patients, as well as a single agent Cabo cohort to 021, following the protocol there to be able to further characterize that, understand the opportunity relative to other potential regulatory approaches. The data that we had at ASCO I thought was very, very encouraging, and we got a lot of positive feedback there from a variety of investigators and KOLs. It was a late line, heavily pretreated population. It was looking at a IO second line population post IO, so those patients were either resistant or refractory to the initial IO, and in fact, half the patients were refractory to their IO, meaning that they never had any clinical benefit and they had progressive disease as their best response to their frontline IO treatment. 90% of those patients were also had received chemotherapy as part of their either combination IO or first or second line IO approach. So there was a heavily pretreated population, and about half the patients were all actually third line patients as well. So it was a heavily pretreated, heavily refractory population, and in that context, we saw a 27% response rate per RECIST 1.1, which means that they were all confirmed responses. You know, obviously, you don't play by the rules here, and with good overall tolerability. And for a late line population like that, with good duration of response and PFS. So it's good. It's very strong signal of activity in a very late line refractory population, and one that has certainly been driving us with our partner Roche Genentech, not only in lung but also in prostate and then second line renal, to embark on a pivotal trial program where we will co-fund those trials. We'll run prostate, they'll run lung and renal, with the idea that this is a classic combine and conquer opportunity where we take our two drugs and with good, if not great, emerging data and push them forward, right, to get the definitive data that we need in the right trial in the right situation. So we're excited about that, and those three trials we would expect to start mid-year plus or minus. Things may be a little bit delayed with the COVID situation, but there's lots of excitement there and lots of people moving around doing stuff to get those things started for sure.
Great, thanks for that. In our closing minutes here, Mike, I did want to maybe spend some time on aspects of the Exelixis story beyond Cabo, which is something we mentioned in our early discussion about the longer term outlook here. And specifically, maybe turning to the pipeline, one of the questions we have for you is, last year you kicked off a phase 1 for your pipeline asset, EXEL-092. And so can you maybe just provide an update on how that's going? Where is that, what's been happening, given all the events that have been happening this year? And when could we, potentially expect an update on that and, how you're thinking about development in any particular indication?
Yeah, for sure. So we've committed to having a presentation on 092 in the second half of the year. The details of who, what, where, when will follow once we have the abstract accepted. So stay tuned on that. In fact, we're going to have a broad offering of updates for our IND candidates going forward in the second half of the year. It's super important for me, and I think it's important for us as an organization to put a stake in the ground and talk about these molecules to kind of get people to understand the data, understand the opportunity, understand how we're going about doing discovery and early development again. So I think you'll have a pretty fulsome description of more than just 092 in the second half of the year, which I'm personally really excited about. I'm really glad that we're at the stage in terms of our data accumulation and data generation to be able to do that. 092 is, look, it's super important, right? We think we spent the last decade understanding the clinical pharmacology and the activity profile of Cabo. We've learned a lot. We've taken those learnings and we think we've designed a better next gen molecule. And we'll talk about why we think it's better and what we did to make it better per se when we present the data. But we're gonna clearly invest a lot in this molecule going forward, right? And I think the mindset is that starting in 2021, potentially you'll start seeing us transition late stage development from Cabo to 092, right? In terms of next indications, next combinations, next doublets, next triplets, et cetera, because we think that's the best way to be able to broadly characterize the franchise around Cabo 092 in a way that really drives value for patients and for shareholders. So stay tuned. Lots more work to do and lots more thinking to go into that, but we have a lot of momentum there, and certainly, the success that we've seen this year in terms of our clinical updates gives us a lot of confidence in the overall approach.
Great. We're definitely looking forward to that, Mike. So unfortunately, we've come up on time here, so we have to end the discussion on that note, which has been very helpful and thoughtful. My thanks to Mike and Susan and Exelixis for participating in the Goldman Sachs Healthcare Conference. We'll have to end it here. Thank you very much.
All right, Paul.
Thank you,
Have
Paul.
a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.